So we've done two songs so far of our special Donato Tanda from 1942, with all the interesting history surrounding it, that there's only a few tracks in his year, that the music sounds different than usual Donato, that after these tracks, more or less 4, 5, 6 tracks, everything ended and Donato stopped recording and only recorded later in a much different style that's not really interesting to us or to dancers. So I shall just recap some of the points from my previous videos, in case you forgot or haven't seen them. And that is that this is slow and sorrowful Donato. So Donato is usually known for at least sounding cheerful, because I would actually disagree and say that the music is often not necessarily that cheerful if you listen to the lyrics, and there's all kinds of things that can be said about that. But in 1942, it's definitely slower and more sad. But also, that's the second point, still recognizable as Donato. And then there are a few more points, like longer solos in the music that do not really apply here as much as in the first two songs, or more space for the singer. Well, this is instrumental, because we're going to discuss an instrumental now. And the last one is no clear accordion. So for anyone who's been paying attention, Donato is the only orchestra that actually involved an accordion, probably to make it sound a little more cheerful. And they're kind of absent here, not in all songs, but at least in the first three we've discussed. So as we've seen, it does actually occur somewhat. You can still hear it, but it's not very present, doesn't get solos. And then a difference between the first and the second song is that the second song was a little more light, and that it was about a very special, apart from just heartbreak, it was about the countryside and the suffering of a gaucho, the heartbreak of a gaucho. And the lyric involved a lot of very, nostalgic, beautiful, poetic language about the Pampas. So in the third song, which is an instrumental, we have some other things to highlight. And it's very interesting that we have an instrumental, because the other songs are all with singers, and because we have to combine them, we need to actually make a combination of singers and an instrumental, which can be quite interesting. This song is called Mishiadura, which is a really difficult word, and you probably don't know it, but that's because it's lunfardo. So that's it's like the dialect from the streets of Buenos Aires from those times, and before the tango boom and everything. The immigrants and people of the city developed their own dialect with their own words, and a lot of it is also has to do with tango, and tango gets its inspiration from those stories and from migration and poverty. And I've always found this word Mishiadura very interesting, because it's actually literally a word from Genovese, so the dialect of Genoa in Italy, where misio means poor. So Mishiadura means pobreza, so poverty. And it's actually quite interesting, because I don't know a lot of songs that very literally in tango describe living conditions of people. And I believe, so there are a lot of lost love songs. And I personally believe that some of these lost love stories actually have to do with, for example, the pain of migrating somewhere unknown, having a hard life, missing your native lands. So it might be a metaphor for something else. But here we actually have a song that's literally called Mishiadura. What's very interesting about instrumentals for me always is that usually, not always, because sometimes there are lyrics, but usually these songs do not have lyrics. So you only get the title, and sometimes you get a nice illustration on the sheet music cover that actually shows what the story is about, especially for very old tangos from the 1910s or something like that. But in this case, all the information we have is poverty. And the code word for this time, because I've given code words to all these songs so far, the code word this time is struggle. And as you can imagine, poverty is a lot of struggle. But I feel like you're gonna hear in the music, you're gonna hear what struggle, what it entails to be a poor inhabitant of Buenos Aires in the 1940s, 1930s, wherever. Sometimes tangos also like to refer to older times. So they talk with nostalgia. We talk with nostalgia about the 40s or the 30s or whatever. And they talk about earlier times. But in any case, there's always been poverty in world history, so it's guaranteed. Whatever years we're actually talking about, it's always there. But this is like a musical description of poverty. So I'm gonna share my sound here. Computer audio. Oh. Let's listen to this. Listen to this violin. It's describing sorrow. And for me, specifically, the sorrow of hardship. So what you hear in this song, immediately it sets like a very strong tone of disappointment, of well, struggle, like I said. Comes kind of cheerful, very high violin. Is it the hope? This is also a bit of an, well, maybe I missed that. I'm a human too. Maybe I missed that. That's a quite clear accordion. I don't think it's only accordion, but it's accordion. And that's not a coincidence, because one of my points about this song is that this song is like a wave flow of hope and disappointment, like life can often be. Like you have these highs and lows, but in specifically this situation, you're a poor migrant or whoever in Argentina, and you are struggling to get by, and you're struggling to make ends meet, or maybe it's much worse than that. Maybe you don't have anything to eat, but you're still working towards a better life, and you get these highs and you get the lows. So it's like the hope and disappointment of being almost like a life story of someone who goes through this. And these things make this song like extra painful, because it's for change is not about some lost love, which also happens to anyone who's very sad, but this is a different kind of sadness. And it's also more like touchable. I don't know what the right word is for that. Tangible. So it's very well known what the effects of poverty are also on people's mental health and things like that. So, but this sounds quite positive. The tone changes again. It sounds like especially this bandoneon. Let me listen to that again. It's both bandoneon and accordion, I think. Sad violin is back. So maybe things are not going that well again. The song slows down a bit. So just to interrupt, so like what I said, what's interesting about instrumentals is that it's always up to your own interpretation, what you make out of it. And of course, there's a lot of hints what it's about, but you can still, especially if the title is not as clear as this one, because this is actually quite a clear story, a clear title, Poverty. But there are some really weird titles in instrumentals, and often it's up to you to imagine. Also, as a dancer, and it's not just because we're listening, but as a dancer, what is this song trying to tell me? And in this case, I feel like there's these two different moods, and it's kind of switching between hope and disappointment, like I said. So let's listen what else comes up. Accordion. That sounded a bit more positive. Quite high piano. The accordion is used here. This is very sad. Sad violin. Oh. Oh. I can almost feel that like in my heart. Final. So that was such a heartbreaking violin, and it's amazing music, because I feel like when you hear that violin, it's like you can almost touch the hardship of, like in another lyric, like there's one song I will talk about at some point that's not known at all. It's Varia Vieja. It's nobody cares, but the lyric is about a man who cannot bring any money back to his family, so he has no money for bread, and he has children and a woman waiting in a shack on the side of the river, and he has nothing to bring them back. And I studied history, and sometimes like these workers, they would spend all their money on booze, and nobody had anything to eat. I'm not sure if that's the case in this one. I think the story is somewhat different. I think maybe he couldn't get any work, or maybe whatever. But it's just, I'm instantly reminded of those kinds of things and those kinds of stories when you hear music like this. So yeah, that's the Poverty. And one thing that you could say about the style in general, it's actually a bit more rhythmical. It's still kind of slow, but it's a bit more rhythmical and a bit more Donato than the first two songs. So, well, this is kind of a weird song, and it's like the weird one in this tanda because it's an instrumental. It's maybe a bit closer to the original Donato style than the first two songs. And as we shall see in the next song, which is the last song of this tanda, that was also recorded first, I believe. So that one is the most similar to normal Donato. And still it's a bit off as well. Something weird, because all tandas, all songs in this tanda are different than usual, and they're not very known. So I hope you enjoyed this interpretation of what an instrumental can tell. And maybe I should have focused even more on what happened in the music or individual instruments, but I think what's the most important here is this contrast between hope and disappointment, and some things in the music that also make you feel the kind of despair that someone in a situation like that with Mishiadura would have. So see you next time.